Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and we are presented by SPI Logistics. And as most of us know, the world is a beneficiary of air, sea, and land methods of shipping. But what if we add another layer to that mix? A fourth transportation layer that standardizes shipping in space with a system of distributed warehouses all over the globe. Enter Inversion Space, where founder Justin Fiaschetti is leading a team of 25 that wants to be the globe's next shipping container, but this time for space deliveries anywhere in the world in under an hour. Sounds a little crazy, right? But also, it sounds kind of friggin' cool. Grace, Sharkey, and I are talking about this startup who, as soon as October 2024, is launching Ray, their autonomous re-entry vehicle to deliver cargo from space in as little as an hour. Is Inversion Space the next Amazon? Who are their customers? And is this even realistic? Grace and I discuss. The little space guy is a perfect segue.
Exactly.
Into our next topic. And that is my source to porch story. And so I want to see what your reaction would be to a company that says, I want to be the shipping container that is making space a transportation layer for Earth. And the mission is to be that fourth transportation layer for Earth. So air, land, sea, they want to be the delivery company
Mars.
in space. No, in space, with warehouses in satellite orbit all over the globe that they can deliver cargo to you in under an hour. That is being billed as the next shipping container.
The only reason I do laugh at it is because right now we're struggling to get like two guys off of our space station.
Boeing is struggling.
Yeah, you're right.
Which is a government-funded contractor who is just not innovating and not doing a very good job. And so companies like SpaceX have to come in and save the day because they're privately held and they can reiterate and be more efficient. Well, they can't do it. Apparently, a lot of issues with that Boeing Dragon capsule, because Dragon capsule is SpaceX, but yeah, the Boeing capsule, they already brought that back first before they brought the humans back. So what was supposed to be like a week-long mission is now turned into something that's going to be like 6 months. So shout out to Boeing for being the use case of why they're technically a government contractor, but that's sort of the issue with a lot of the landscape, especially in Department of Defense budgets and even NASA budgets, is that, you have these companies that are just so used to getting a paycheck and they get unlimited funds. There's no incentive to reiterate, to be efficient, to be lean. And so what you'll watch, and especially if you watch the Wild Wild Space documentary, I just did an episode on this, but go watch that documentary. It's on Max/HBO. But if you go watch that documentary, it really highlights the parallel between private companies and the companies that are, just ingrained in NASA and have been, like Boeing, for years. But, a SpaceX or a Rocket Lab kind of comes onto the scene, and they are really revolutionizing, I should say, in a real way, not just some marketing gimmick copy, but they are revolutionizing space travel to where reusable rockets have changed the game. And because you can have reusable rockets, it brings the price down to travel into space tremendously. Yeah. So with all of that said, I want to talk about Inversion Space. They are the new warehouse. What they are building is a component. Instead of kind of going through, I want to bring up one of their videos, which, hold on, but they are called Inversion Space. And so what they're essentially doing is, what they would want is around 30 of these warehouse locations in space to store goods. They start by funding or getting their funding and working with the Department of Defense, disaster relief, for the idea that they have a certain amount of goods that are stored in this warehouse, and that if you need some of these items, whether it's a disaster going on, hikers who are lost, that need supplies, a shipwreck on an island or something like that. All of these different components, or you need drones that need to be shipped, to a secure location. That is the goal of what Inversion Space is trying to do, is create the set of a distributed warehouse model where you have the same kind of goods, very similar to Amazon, the same kind of goods in all of your warehouses located all across the globe. So then that when someone needs them, the Department of Defense, or maybe someone's in trouble or disaster happens, that they can take their vehicles, that they're fully autonomous vehicles that have this cargo, and that they can go to that position around the globe and be able to drop that cargo right where you need it. And so in under an hour, that is the promise. They have their first launch scheduled for this October, and the vehicle is called Ray. And so I'm going to bring up a quick video to play.
That's why I want to see what this looks like.
So I'll bring this full screen. Okay, let's play this quick 1-minute video.
All these cute manufacturers. Where are they at? Oh, wow.
So that's one of the capsules that they're dropping as a test.
So that like black box at the end would like hold it good and it would like fall from space.
Yeah. So if you are just listening and you weren't able to watch the video, so they're basically they're building everything themselves except for what's already available on the market. So the founder, whose name is Justin Fiaschetti, he has a company, Inversion Space, that's about 25 people at the company. So they have very lean operations. They focus on sort of the Anduril funding model, which is Anduril is another sort of private company that is proving concepts first before they try to do business with the government. So for folks who may not know, typically, a lot of the big contractors that work for Department of Defense, Lockheed Martin comes to mind. There's a few others. Northrop Grumman is another one. But these companies have been doing business with the government for years. They've had these contracts locked down. There's not really an incentive for them to be as lean as a startup. That's not, any shade whatsoever one way or another to each company, but startups typically run leaner, and they have to prove, sort of profitability a little bit sooner than some of their counterparts. Now you can they are funded. I think their first round was only $10 million. And I say only with obviously salt, but you're going to space, like $10 million is a drop in the bucket compared to someone like Boeing that's wasting billions of dollars on equipment that doesn't work. But yes, so their goal is to be the shipping container, but in space. And that little capsule that you saw, those are the capsules that have the goods inside of them. And so they're the way that they sort of pitch it is that we have the same products in each of our warehouses in each of these capsules. Not that, they have probably disaster relief supplies in one of the capsules and, different supplies, drones maybe in another capsule. And that's part of that one warehouse. So they want around 30 of these warehouses all across the globe. And so then that way, working with their customers, working with their partners, like the Department of Defense, they can prove the model first. They can prove the usability, the profitability, or not necessarily profitability, but cost structure, cheaper costs, dependent on the need. Now, for somebody like the Department of Defense, they don't have to now, have a company that jumps through all of these hoops and hopes to become a defense contractor. They can just see in the market, okay, Anduril is building, this type of product. We like the way that looks and that functions, so we're going to go and buy some stuff from them. That is the same model that Inversion Space is using as well. So they're proving the model first. And so they're hopping on these different cargo missions from SpaceX, from Rocket Lab, companies like that, where they can put their cargo on those missions, send it up into space, and then do a test. And so when that video, that was one of their tests, by taking one of those capsules that have the goods inside of it, and then focusing on the wherever it is in the globe that somebody is going to need those supplies. So the 30 cargo spots around the globe that acts as a distributed warehouse. There was a lot of just really good takeaways going back to this tweet where they kind of break down a lot of these different functions. It's their next big launch is happening in October with their device called Ray, and that device is going to be their first test run of this concept, of this product. So when Ray goes up into space, then they'll really be able to test it. So in the video that we played, they're testing that capsule from high altitude planes. The next test will be testing it delivery from space, and that's coming up in October.
Are you in freight sales with a book of business looking for a new home? Or perhaps you're a freight agent in need of a better partnership? These are the kinds of conversations we're exploring in our podcast interview series called The Freight Agent Trenches, sponsored by SPI Logistics. Now, I can tell you all day that SPI is one of the most successful logistics firms in North America who helps their agents with back office operations such as admin, finance, IT, and sales, but I would much rather you hear it directly from SPI's freight agents themselves. And what better way to do that than by listening to the experienced freight agents tell their stories behind the how and the why they joined SPI. Hit the freight agent link in our show notes to listen to these conversations, or if you're ready to make the jump, visit spi3pl.com.
I'm really surprised that no one else in our industry has covered this yet. Hopefully that we'll have some more coverage afterwards, because I really love this concept, and I can't believe that there are people out here that are thinking this way. One of their taglines is making space a transportation layer for Earth. So they have a really slick website. Not that kind of has.
Oh, that's a nice website.
So this is, let me pull back up. I'll start at the top. But it says making space a transportation layer. You can kind of see that capsule that's right on it, or that's right on the homepage with the little parachute of the item being delivered. And so basically these items are going to be stored in space until somebody needs them. And then what happens after, when somebody needs them, they put in the call, they find out which warehouse is the closest to the location that they need it dropped. So the Inversion Space team will go in, they'll put the coordinates, and then after they put in the coordinates, they're done. So all of the tracking is supplied to whatever customer is making that order. Their use cases right now is Department of Defense, and then disaster relief. And so once they prove the model with those two markets, then it kind of opens up the door to do more of like the privatization. So, different goods. Now, he does kind of theorize that this could be a concept that, in maybe like 5 to 10 years, when you order something from Amazon, that it's actually getting dropped in your backyard. I don't really think that that's going to be feasible, because it's crazy to even think about, the expenses of that. But as we do this more, as more private companies become involved in space, then it creates a situation where there's incredibly more demand. There's much more supply. Prices come down. The cost to book even a flight right now to get into space is around $25,000. But that is a way.
It is coming down.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's
Leonardo DiCaprio is just kicking himself right now for what he paid. It is crazy to I'm reading this and looking at the site, and it's crazy to think that you know, we might be writing about the tech innovation behind re-entry vehicles, you know, like.
And that's another thing that they're building too. That the other product that they're building is called ARC, and it's a fully autonomous vehicle inside of space, so they can kind of propel that vehicle for both reusability and reentry. So then that way they can keep reusing, and if you can reuse it, and that also brings down your prices. And so these are just really, really the less than 1 hour global delivery.
I like
is
if you
crazy.
go up though, the and I'm sure it'll go down, but if you go back up to the ARC, it says mission duration less than 5. Oh, so it probably means it can be in space for about 5 years. Okay, yes. Cool.
So I was like, in space for
you're gonna get your item just 3.5 years from now.
But that landing accuracy within 50 of the GPS coordinates is just crazy. So there was a couple other little notes.
So it's like when we are like sending letters back to our packages back to our parents from Mars in like 40 years, like it's gonna get them. It's gonna get back there.
My only I guess concerns and I want to
it's a few concerns.
Yeah, it's a few concerns. So I'm trying to get Inversion. I'm trying to get Justin on the show. So I've reached out to him on LinkedIn and Twitter. I haven't heard back yet. So maybe this this segment will help in that regard. I'm going to send it over to their PR team. I see you writing notes over there. Are you trying to get somebody to beat me to the punch?
I'm looking up right now their investors.
Oh, they're a Y Combinator. So they're YC. I'm not sure if they're actual investors, but they're a YC funded company or a YC alum. But that's how they got their, sort of initial funding round of $10 million, which feels like peanuts when you're talking about like space investments. The only concern, so, as I'm learning more about like space logistics and things like that, there are no government bodies in space where it's like from a regulatory standpoint. It's kind of a very much a wild, wild west. Like there's no rules, there's no laws, there's no regulations. It's just kind of like a loose set of agreements that we're not exactly sure if like other countries are going to follow. One example in particular is Russia wanted to test one of their missiles. And so for a satellite that they already had in orbit that wasn't working anymore, Russia decides we're going to send a missile up to do a missile test, which is essentially just like a show of force. So they do this missile test, they blow up their own satellite, but it sends all of these pieces of debris into orbit. And so you're creating like this debris field that's going to impact all of the other. I mean, the global like space community apparently was like just pissed off that this happened because of all of the issues that were going to, or secondary issues that were going to be caused because Russia wanted to do a missile test. And so when you think about the debris field that they created from that one missile test, just think if like you piss off the wrong country or you piss off the wrong person. There's also like companies that, I talked about this also in the NASA series that I dropped, that there's companies now that monitor the debris. And so you can get like visibility into debris fields so you can maneuver your satellites around it so they don't get damaged by a screw that is traveling thousands of miles an hour, that if it hits your satellite, it's going to severely damage that satellite. So my main concern is with these warehouse locations, with the focus on the Department of Defense, what happens if one of these things gets attacked? What happens if you're storing something that's not necessarily a drone? It's, some kind of explosive devices, things like that you're storing, and somebody else gets a little mad about it, or oops, my satellite ran into this warehouse and it causes it to explode. Like, what happens then? If there's no regulatory bodies in space, who is at fault and who does that affect? If that debris field doesn't actually stay in orbit and that debris falls to Earth and kills somebody, like what happens then? Who's responsible? None of these things
are being answered yet, because these are all completely new problems. There's one stat that sort of like blows me away, is that we have about 8,000 satellites right now in lower Earth orbit. In the next 10 years, it's projected to be 200,000. And so if we have all of those sort of moving parts going on in space, all it takes is one bad actor to mess it all up and to ruin weather satellites, GPS satellites, communications, anything like that, our life is powered on Earth by satellites. And so if one bad actor messes up and does something, explodes something, it's crazy secondary effects that could happen from that.
At the Samsara event, we were talking to the girl who's like VP of product for that space company, and she was like, there's some really crazy I don't want to call it conspiracy theories, but like end of the world type of theories around just the space trash alone. And
oh wow.
And yeah, you know me, I was like already fangirling over this girl. Yeah, well, I had one of my banker buddies with me, and I'm like, listen to this girl. Like so I should connect you guys, and maybe we can do an episode with her, because she seems like I had brought up space trash because I was trying to explain to him, like, there's an app I use to look at the stars and stuff like that and find planets, and you can actually see all the trash satellites and stuff in space. And she brought it up as like a huge deal, and like looked like it was like a doomsday event situation. So I 100% agree. And we have someone working on the inversion interview for you. So hopefully for those out there, you'll be able to have that episode soon.
Come on, Justin, get on the show. We want some of these questions answered, which I'm sure that he's thought about, because he does seem like a very thoughtful founder with the way that he is approaching this. So that is one, but he hasn't done I tried, Googling YouTube, that kind of thing. He's only done a couple interviews, so I definitely want to hear more about their plans on becoming, that next shipping container, because if you can standardize some of this stuff, this could be the next sort of like the box, revolution, that, that the container that revolutionized global trade. Maybe this is that next thing that's going to revolutionize global trade. Costs continue to come down. I mean, obviously, this is not something that's probably going to happen in the next 5 years, but it might happen in the next 10 years, especially with the growth of space. And, we just saw the Polaris mission the other day, when, you have four just civilians that, go on a commercial flight and get to do a spacewalk. So these things are happening at a rapid pace. And I don't know that a lot of people are aware of everything that's going on. So I am going to link to a couple of the interviews that I found just to prep for this story, because I couldn't believe it hasn't been covered. I mean, if you're calling yourself the next shipping container, this to me needs definitely some more eyeballs on it. And I would love to know, from the shipping community, on what they think the likelihood of something like this will mean, because there's a lot of debate also around the supersonic planes. And, that was supposed to be sort of the next wave of revolutionizing delivery, is with these super or hypersonic planes. And so with hypersonic planes, or I guess comparing it to inversion space, Justin was saying in one of the interviews that there's a lot of complexities with landing the craft. And so if you can remove the landing of a plane, then it removes a lot of that complexity, because there's another company called like Dream Scope or Dream Sight or something like that, that was trying to do something a little similar to inversion space, but they are focusing on sort of the plane model, and the landing of it is proving to be much more complex. And so for Justin's company, Inversion, they are focusing on these capsules that they can just parachute in and drop in, and it creates significantly less barriers for that cargo to get delivered.
Brokering success demands a battle-ready strategy. Tide TMS equips freight brokers with the ultimate battle station for conquering a tough market. With TIE, brokers gain access to a comprehensive platform where rate intelligence and quote history converge on a single screen. It's not just a page, it's a strategic command center designed to help brokers win. TIE equips your team with all of the data they need to negotiate with confidence and allows them to communicate directly with carriers and customers from a simple control base. Revolutionize the way your brokers perform by giving them a competitive advantage with TIE TMS. For more info, go to tai-software.com/battle stations, and we also have a link for you in the show notes to sign up for a demo.
So crazy. Yeah. Looks like he was at SpaceX before too. So
Yep.
Interesting stuff.
I know it is going back to that Wild Space documentary. A lot of these people come from like the same, they come from like a lot of the same companies. I'm really interested to hear, because after watching that documentary, I became such a fan of Robert Peake. I think that's his name. He's the CEO and founder of Rocket Lab. And now I follow, it is Robert Beck, or Peter Beck. That's his name, Peter Beck. Got it finally. But Peter Beck apparently interviewed over at NASA and wanted to work for them because he was such a space enthusiast. And he said that everybody at NASA was talking about all the things that they used to do. They weren't talking about the things that they wanted to do in the future. So that caused him to not take the job at NASA and to start up Rocket Lab. And now Rocket Lab has over 50 completed reusable rocket missions or takeoffs versus like a Blue Origin, or Astra is another company that they're trying to do, reusable rockets, very much like SpaceX, but they're still running into, a lot of issues. Which you'll see in that documentary, much less, not so much on Blue Origin, but more on that other company. But Rocket Lab kind of just feels like they're being led by someone who is like a mad scientist, but with a good soul. That's what it feels like to me. That's like awesome. He's doing it just because he's like been a space nerd his whole life. And he's building rockets in literally his backyard in New Zealand and launching them. And so it's an awesome kind of thing to see. Highly recommend following them on social media too, because they just have a lot of really cool stuff, and they've done over 50 successful missions using reusable rockets. And so that's another company to kind of keep an eye on. But that documentary is great. And I love the parallels that they were talking about just from the privatization of space and getting into space, and, sort of the name of it, Wild Space, leads to, sort of the wild west and sort of the lawlessness of it, and who's going to be making these rules and regulations, and are they going to have a responsibility to follow those rules and regulations? Like it's going to have to be a global effort, because it's not just the United States and Russia that have space programs anymore. I mean, we were talking, India has a very strong space program. Japan has one that does, just to name a few of these different companies that are, trying to get their stuff into space and trying to ride this wave.
Well, it's interesting too, because I don't know if you got a chance, and by the time this comes out, it won't be from yesterday, but probably the past week, but I don't know if you got a chance to see the Oprah special last night on AI. Yeah. Oprah did like Oprah, she loves to do a special on things. And she did a really good AI special with Bill Gates and the ChatGPT guy, and also just like historians as well. And Altman. And, something that they brought up, and it kind of reminds me of this exact situation, is like, with the invention of the car, because of how slowly that moved, they're able to at the same time create regulations and rules and driver license protocol and street signs and all that, while that technology grew. And what they're struggling a little bit with AI, and I kind of see the same thing with space, is because it's like ramping so fast, because it's being introduced and it's able to be used. Like, anyone with a credit card, or even get a free version, can use ChatGPT today. It's hard to figure out the process, like, where it's moving faster than the regulation, right? And it just reminds me of the same problem with space. Is like, it's not that any of this technology is bad, but it goes back to like your fear of like, okay, well, all this stuff could be really useful and helpful, but who is going to be standing behind it? Are we going to have to build like a space or like regulatory body with different countries? But again, we are already like discovering ways to do the things that regulatory body would look over. So it's like we're running behind the technology instead of like moving along with it at the same time and building the rules that go with it too. And so it's just an interesting thing to think about, like how can we slow down the adoption so that we can build the cybersecurity measures to keep AI safe, and again, make sure that it's being utilized in the correct way. So same thing, I think we're gonna have a problem with space, which does, make me nervous as well, as I'm sure it does you.
Yeah. And it's too, some of these things start off with the best of intentions.
Yes,
And
100%.
then it gets evolved into, so I think Planet Labs was another one of the companies that was featured in the Wild Wild Space documentary, or where they started off as an imaging company. And right now, even Justin says the only way you're going to make money in space, or the only things making money in space right now, is imaging and internet. And so he hopes to, be that, sort of, storage company for companies in space for a variety of reasons. That's sort of the ultimate goal. But like Planet Labs, for example, they started off with imaging because they wanted to stop deforestation and be able to take images of the Earth. But then that evolves into, well, who's really going to pay for, sort of deforestation? But somebody who will pay for imaging is monitoring military movements, monitoring equipment movements, monitoring, disasters and things like that. So it's they have
drones. Drones the same way. I need to get clearance from the, FAA, and the only way to do that is to make it for medical supplies. And so that's why a lot of those startups say, so it's interesting. That's what makes the whole like inventor/investment like arena really fun, because there is this like the speed aspect of it. That's like something I'm sure a lot of people have heard Craig Fuller talk about, right? It's like not just about like, building something, but building it fast, that you're beating everyone to the punch, but also finding that how are we going to make it profitable, right, at the same time. So
and profitable.
It'll be a fun one to watch.
So speed, profitability, obviously, matters for a lot of companies. But then also when you're talking about space and you're talking about all these additional complexities, it makes, sort of the rules and the regulations, and then who decides those rules and regulations. And then it makes it all a little bit more, I guess, juicy to participate in, or to, I guess, kind of hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Because that was another, to go back to that documentary, they said all of the problems that are here on Earth will follow us to space. And so how are we going to address these things? And these are big questions that need to be answered. And I don't think that, Inversion Space has to answer them, but I do think that they have to answer, what are the contingency plans if something gets attacked? If you're storing goods for the Department of Defense, I think it's a reasonable question to ask of, if you're storing weapons and things like that, who's protecting that cargo, number one, in space? And then what happens if, oopsie, like a Russia, we need to do a missile test, or, right.
Ray explodes up in the air. Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of questions I think that still need to be answered. And anytime you have innovations like this, new questions are going to come up. So I'm sure that they have, answers for some of these, and then there are going to be more questions that pop up that they probably never thought about. And so how they address it in the future, and how I think space logistics addresses it in the future will maybe lead to, 1 hour deliveries, and, you don't have to pay Amazon Prime anymore. You can just pay Inversion Space.
And you just say, I'm trying to remember like how long. Oh, hello everyone.
She said, this show is done. Grace's cat walks across the screen.
This is Cow. Say hello, Cow. Well, if it makes you feel better, he was just staring into the space's eye for like the past 2 minutes. So I'm like, I don't know.
Contemplating the hard questions. Yeah. Sounds like.
But remember the Red Bull guy who like fell from space? Like what? Like that took him like 20 minutes to fall. So like for the last 20 minutes of our delivery, we'll just be able to like watch it come from the sky.
Might hit you in the head, and then who's responsible?
It's totally on its way. I can see it right there.